Persona 3 Reload, a remake of the classic Atlus game, has been announced. And with it, there's been a lot of discussion and debate surrounding whether or not this will be the definitive version. This was made worse when people reporting on the game said that it will include none of the content from Persona 3 FES or Persona 3 Portable. So before we can really look at Reload, we must first examine the pros and cons of FES versus Portable, and why memes like this are so misleading. The original Persona 3 released in 2006, and a year later we got an upgraded version known as Persona 3 FES. The FES standing for Festival. Persona 3 FES is split into two sections: The Question, or literally just Persona 3 with some slight changes, and The Answer, which is a completely separate side story epilogue. But we'll get to that later. However, for the main story Persona 3, FES added new personas, it added some new social links, including fan-favorite character Aigis, it added side quests, and it added giving Koromaru walks, which can sometimes either give you items or help with other social links. It also added a hard mode and weapon fusion. 2 years after FES, we would get Persona 3 Portable on the PlayStation Portable. Being on the PSP, this game had to be scaled back considerably compared to its console counterpart. The main overworld has been replaced by point-and-click adventure mechanics, with the only actual walking around being in dungeons. Back in 2009, it's understandable why people might play this version if they only had a PSP, or if they just wanted it portably, because portable consoles back then weren't as powerful, so having Persona 3 at all run on it is pretty impressive. However, most people playing portable today are not playing it through a PSP, but rather through one of the many console ports. So for the main story of Persona 3, why would you play Portable over FES or the original? Well, one of the biggest criticisms of those two versions is that they have AI-controlled party members. Portable actually lets you control your party members in combat, which a lot of people view as a big improvement. This feature alone has led many people to play Portable over FES. Portable would also add the beginner and maniac difficulties, co-op attacks, a guy who looks like Vincent from Catherine but technically isn't, and the Vision Quest, which is a series of harder versions of the game's bosses, culminating into a secret boss fight with a fan-favorite character. Also, Portable includes FES's difficulty modes, its new personas, its new social links, and basically everything that doesn't have to do with walking around on the overworld or having to do with the Answer, which is not a part of the main game. So those are the main pros and cons of Portable versus FES. But it's also worth noting that Persona 3 Portable was ported to Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Steam, all with achievements, unlike Persona 3 FES, where you would have to break out the old PS2 or PS3. So now we know the differences between FES and Portable and why there's such a debate between the two. And that begs the question, why wouldn't Atlus use the changes from both of these to make the definitive Persona 3 experience? Like I said, the main reason why most people play the main male character in Portable is exclusively for controllable party members, and it's like, why wouldn't Atlus add beloved features like that into 3 Reload? It's like if I watch this trailer and wait a second, what's that? Is that a controllable party member? Well, that must be a one-off, right? Oh wait, the quest menu? The quests that were only added in FES? Huh. Weapon fusion from FES? I'm starting to think the clickbait headlines about how there would be no FES or Portable improvements weren't entirely accurate. So yeah, since then an interview has came out saying that gameplay and story improvements to the base story of Persona 3 from Portable and FES will still be included. So if you're new to the Persona fanbase, or just learning about the versions of Persona 3, a lot of people online will make it sound like, ooh, FMC, ooh, the Answer, we need both to be definitive, when the actual debate around a definitive Persona 3 stems from the fact that if you want to play the main story, you kinda had to choose between presentation or better gameplay. As long as Reload is faithful to the original story and doesn't pull some Strange Journey Redux stuff, we will be getting a version of Persona 3 with both great gameplay and great presentation. So if you just want to play the main story of Persona 3, the only real reason to return to FES now is if you really like the original graphics or want to have that original experience. And as for if you want to play the main story of Persona Portable with the male main character, there's very little to reason to do so over FES or Reload. So Reload is finally giving us a definitive recommendation of how to play the main story of Persona 3. The only exception might be the Vision Quest, however that's such a minor thing compared to all the other improvements from combining the main story of FES and Portable into one package with great presentation. It seems for like the main game, any reason you would play FES or Portable is now just in Reload. The only exception might be the Vision Quest, however that's such a minor thing compared to all the other improvements from combining the main story of FES and Portable into one package with great presentation. If you've only played Persona 4 Golden or played Persona 5 Royal and don't know much about Persona 3 FES, you might be mistaken into thinking that to get to the answer, you will have to complete the main story of Persona 3 FES. That's actually not the case. Much like Xenoblade Future Connected or Torna the Golden Country or Fire Emblem Three Houses Cindered Shadows, this is on its own save file that does not connect to your main Persona 3 save. It's its own side mode. It is a sequel to Persona 3. However, it's its own little game rather than having to beat the entirety of Persona 3. While it is a disappointment we won't be getting the answer with better gameplay on modern consoles, it is worth noting that you can still play Persona 3 The Answer without having to play the entirety of the main story Persona 3 FES. So if you've already played Reload or Portable or even the original, you do not have to play FES to play The Answer. The Answer both wasn't critically acclaimed and also probably just couldn't fit onto the PSP. So as an alternative for Portable, Atlus gave us the FEMC route, or female protagonist for short. At the start of Persona 3 Portable, you get a pick from the original main character, or the new female character, Kotone Shiomi. A lot of people who have not played both routes just view this as a simple gendered option. Think of games like Pokemon, or more relevant to this case, Shin Megami Tensei If. However, that's really not the case. The FEMC drastically alters the game. Most of her social links are with completely different characters, and even just her cheery demeanor alone has to change a lot of dialogue. Some scenes are just replaced with other characters that would make more sense. For example, a lot of early game of Junpei explaining stuff to the main character is replaced with Yukari explaining stuff to the main character. And I did not want to go into spoilers in this video, but some late game events are drastically altered by her inclusion. The FEMC route also added a new Velvet Room attendant who was not in the original game. His name is Theodore. At the start of the FEMC route, you get a pick between Elizabeth from the original or Theodore. However, if you're playing Portable through the original male route, you actually don't get to pick Theodore, he's exclusive to the FEMC route. When starting up Persona 3 Portable, the game tells you, this is a mode for people who have experienced Persona 3 before. It actively plays with your expectations from the original story, rather than just being a replacement if you don't want to play as a male main character like a lot of games like Pokemon or Shin Megami Tensei If or one of those. While it's a huge shame that she isn't being included, especially with how much of a fan favorite character she is, when it comes to the debate of how you should play the original story of Persona 3, her story is supplementary to the original, rather than being an outright gendered replacement like a lot of people want it to be. Again, it is kind of a shame we aren't getting the answer or the FEMC route in Reload. However, if you just want that base Persona 3 experience with all of the upgrades, enhancements, and other improvements to the original game, it really seems like Reload will be the best way to go. If you really want to play the Answer or the FEMC route, you can go back to those after playing Reload. However, you won't be forced to replay the original Persona 3 story to get those, unlike if Persona 4 Golden or Persona 5 Royal, where you have to go through the entire game to get to the new stuff. However, if you want to say it's still not the definitive Persona 3 because you're missing important story bits with the original Persona 3 cast by missing out on the answer in the FMC route, honestly the same can be said for the Arena story, because the Arena story is a canon sequel to 3, and really goes into how those characters have developed and continued into their futures. So is it really the definitive Persona 3 if we don't also have the Arena story in Reload? Obviously Persona Q and Persona Dancing is a stretch, but honestly Persona 4 Arena and Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, their stories are actually just as important to the 3 cast as the answer is. Also, if we could just get a remake of Aigis the first mission, that would be pretty great. That thing, outside of like a single walkthrough video, is basically lost media. So finally, what I'm getting at here is Reload looks like a good way to experience the original story. You might have to bust out FES or Portable if you want the extra side content, but even then, at least it's side content there and not having to play through the entirety of Persona 3 again to get all of that new stuff you haven't played before. It looks like a good video game. Now if you excuse me, I have some bread to burn.